The twins had been walking for barely 5 minutes when a deep voice behind Mary made her whole body stiffen. She didn't turn. She didn't even breathe. The laughter of the boys faded around her, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like the air had frozen. "Mary," the voice said again, low, angry and trembling. "What is this?" Her fingers went cold. She knew that voice too well. James Walker, the man who had forbidden her to ever take his children outside. The man whose house was colder than any winter she'd known. Slowly, Mary turned around. James was standing a few steps away on the grass, his suit still perfect, his expression anything but. His face was red, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on her like she'd just broken something priceless. "Mr. Walker," she managed, her voice shaking. "Please, let me explain. You took my sons out of that house." His voice rose. "You took them out here without my permission." Mary opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. He stepped closer. "Do you realize what you've done? They could have fallen. They could have—" He stopped. The words died in his mouth. Because right in front of him, little Noah was standing, really standing, his small hands gripping the edge of the picnic blanket for balance. And beside him, Eli took one shaky step forward, then another. James blinked hard, as if his mind couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. "They're walking?" he whispered. Mary nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "Yes, sir, they just did." For months those boys had never spoken, never stood, never moved on their own. Every doctor said it was impossible. But here, under the open sky, they were moving like any other children. Eli looked up at Mary and gave a soft, happy sound, half laugh, half word. Then he said something that made the entire world go still. "Ma, Ma." James froze, his breath caught in his chest. The first word his sons ever spoke wasn't Dad. It was Mama, and it was meant for the woman he had just accused of disobedience. James didn't move. The briefcase he'd been carrying slipped from his hand and landed hard on the grass. He didn't even look down. His sons Eli and Noah were standing. Not in his imagination. Not with help. They were really standing. He took one step forward and stopped again. His chest felt tight, his thoughts loud. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. Mary knelt, her arms half open, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "It's okay," she whispered to the boys. "You're safe. I'm right here." The twins wobbled, laughing the way children laugh when they discover something new. It was the first sound James had ever heard from them that wasn't a cry. He wanted to speak, but his throat closed. Months of frustration pressed against him, doctors, silence, money spent for nothing, sleepless nights filled with the sound of his own guilt. And now this woman, a maid he'd almost fired last week for touching the wrong folder, was kneeling on the ground, showing him the impossible. "Mary," he said finally, his voice unsteady. "How? When?" She didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she helped Eli back to his feet. "They just started," she said softly. "They wanted to try." James stared at his sons again. Their steps were small, clumsy, but real. They laughed at each other's movements like it was a secret only they could share. He turned away for a moment, rubbing his face, as if afraid the tears might win. He'd been the man who built towers of glass downtown, who never broke down, never let emotion slip past his control. But right here, on this patch of grass, that image was cracking. The sound of their laughter tore through every wall he'd built around himself. He remembered the night Laura had died, how he'd stood outside the hospital door, hearing the nurses whisper, "One made it, the mother didn't." He hadn't held the twins since then. Not once. He told himself it was work. The truth was, he couldn't bear to feel the reminder of what he'd lost. Now, looking at them, he realized how much time he had wasted hiding from the very people who needed him most. He dropped to one knee beside them. The grass pressed cool against his palms. "Eli," he whispered. The boy turned his head toward the sound, eyes bright. A smile spread across his small face, and then came the word again, soft but clear. "Ma, Ma." It hit him harder than any accusation. He turned to Mary, his mouth dry. "They called you." She nodded once, quickly, eyes down. "They call everyone Mama when they're learning to talk, sir. It's just a sound." But even she didn't believe that. The way her voice cracked gave her away. James looked between them. The twin boys. The woman kneeling in the grass. The sound of that word echoing in his head. Mama. A part of him wanted to be angry again, to say she had crossed a line, to reclaim control, but another part, deeper and more honest, whispered that he didn't deserve to be angry. Not after the months he had stayed away. He cleared his throat. "Pack up the things, we're leaving." Mary froze. "Sir, please don't." "I said pack them up," he snapped, but his voice lacked the old edge. "We're going home." She obeyed quietly. The twins fussed as she lifted them back into the stroller. They reached for her hands, not wanting the moment to end. She kissed their foreheads before fastening the straps. James walked ahead without another word, his shoes crunching over the gravel path. Mary followed, pushing the stroller, heart racing. She had broken every rule he'd given her. She had risked everything for this small miracle. Was it enough to save her job, or had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? When they reached the car, he opened the door and stood aside for her. That small gesture alone was strange. He never did that. Neither spoke during the drive. The twins slept, their heads leaning together, tiny mouths open, peaceful. Back at the mansion, the silence felt heavier than usual. The walls seemed to hold their breath. James stopped at the base of the stairs and turned to her. "Take them upstairs," he said. "Then come to the office." Her stomach dropped. "Yes, sir." She carried the twins to their room, tucked them in, and lingered a moment, watching their chests rise and fall. For the first time since she had met them, they looked free of fear. That was enough to give her courage. When she stepped into the office, James was standing by the window, looking out at nothing. He didn't turn. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly. "Because they needed to see the world," she replied. "They've spent their whole lives in that room. They needed sunlight. They needed to feel alive." He turned slowly, studying her face. There was no anger now, just confusion, exhaustion, and something close to shame. "You disobeyed me," he said. "Yes," she admitted, "and if I hadn't, you'd never have seen what they can do." The room stayed silent. Only the ticking clock filled it. Finally he sighed, sat down, and covered his face with both hands. "I don't know how to be their father," he whispered. Mary stood still. Then, softly, "Then let me help you learn." The words hung in the air between them, fragile but full of meaning. He didn't answer. He only nodded once, slowly, the kind of nod that meant a door had just opened inside a man who hadn't felt anything for a long time. Outside, the night settled over the city. Inside the Walker estate, something had begun to change. It started with 2 small steps in the park, but it would soon reach every broken heart in that house. For 3 days, the house felt strange. No shouting, no orders, just silence. Mary did her work as usual, but every time she walked past the office door, she could feel James's presence, inside, quiet, heavy, watching. He hadn't fired her, not yet. But he also hadn't said another word about what happened at the park. Mrs. Davis, the head housekeeper, noticed the tension. "He's not himself," she whispered one morning. Mary gave a small smile. Maybe that's not a bad thing. The twins were sleeping better now. They woke with soft sounds instead of cries. When Mary hummed, they smiled, their small faces lighting up as if they finally recognized safety. Every night, she wrote in her notebook. Day 21. They laughed at each other today. Just a sound, but full of life. I think they're beginning to trust the world. She kept the notebook hidden. James didn't need to see it yet. He wanted progress on paper, something to measure. But what she was seeing couldn't be counted. It had to be felt. On the fourth evening, James called her name from the hallway. His voice sounded different, not angry, not cold, just tired. "Mary, come in for a moment." She entered the office, her heart beating fast. He wasn't behind the desk this time. He was standing near the fireplace, holding a photo frame, a woman with soft eyes and brown hair. "My wife," he said quietly. "Laura." Mary nodded, unsure if she should speak. "She died right after the twins were born," he continued. "I was in another country. I didn't even make it back in time." His hand shook as he set the frame down. "I blamed them for it, not out loud, but inside. I told myself it wasn't their fault, but every time I looked at them, I saw what I'd lost." Mary swallowed hard. "Grief can do that, sir. It makes love feel dangerous." James looked at her, eyes tired. "And yet, you walk around this house, loving them like it's easy." "It's not easy," she said softly. "But it's right." He nodded slowly, then changed the subject. "The doctor is coming tomorrow to check their progress. Be here with them." Dr. Allen arrived the next morning. The same man who had told James the boys might never talk or walk. He looked surprised when he entered the nursery. "Good heavens," he murmured. "They're alert. They're actually following movement." Mary lifted Noah onto her lap. "They're learning fast," she said gently. The doctor smiled. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." James stood behind them, arms crossed, saying nothing. His face didn't show much, but his eyes followed every move. When Noah giggled at Mary's necklace, something inside him seemed to soften. After the doctor left, James lingered at the nursery door. He looked at the boys, really looked, and asked, "What did you do that I couldn't?" Mary glanced up. "I didn't do anything special. I just stayed. I made them feel safe enough to try." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Then he turned and left. From that day, things began to shift quietly. James started coming home earlier. He didn't know what to say to the twins, so he just stood in the doorway and watched. The first night he tried to feed them, he made a mess of the kitchen, spilling formula everywhere. But Mary didn't laugh. She showed him how to hold the bottle, how to talk to them gently while they drank. The next morning, Eli reached for his father's tie, tugging it softly. James froze, afraid to move, afraid to break the moment. Mary whispered from behind him, "Let him." So he did. And for the first time since they were born, he laughed. Not the polite kind he used in business meetings, but a real, shaky laugh that came from somewhere deep. The twins laughed back, a sound that filled the room like light through open windows. Mary turned away for a moment, hiding her tears. That night, when the house was quiet, James stood outside the nursery door. He could hear Mary humming softly, the same tune she had sung at the park. He leaned against the wall, listening. He wanted to thank her, but every time he opened his mouth, pride held him back. He wasn't used to needing help. He wasn't used to being wrong. Inside, Mary sat between the two cribs, reading from her old songbook. The twins had started making sounds when she sang small attempts, broken pieces of words. She smiled and whispered, "That's how it begins." In her notebook, she wrote later that night, "Day 30, Mr. Walker stayed by the door for 10 minutes tonight. He thinks I didn't notice, but I did." By the end of the month, the mansion felt different. The air wasn't so heavy. The boys filled the halls with laughter and clumsy steps. Even Mrs. Davis smiled more. But a new kind of tension was growing. James had started asking quiet questions about schedules, about what else Mary planned to do, about why she still refused to follow the therapy routines. He wasn't angry this time. He was curious, maybe even afraid. Afraid of trusting someone again. And Mary could feel it. Every small success brought them closer, but it also pulled at something inside him that still resisted change. One night, she found him sitting alone in the living room, lights off, staring at the old family piano. He didn't notice her at first. His hands were on the keys, but he wasn't playing. "Did she play?" Mary asked softly. He nodded. Every night, she used to say the twins kicked hardest when she played lullabies. Mary stepped closer. "Maybe that's what they've been waiting for." He looked up at her eyes, full of confusion and pain. "Mary," he said quietly, "what if I've already missed my chance to be their father?" She shook her head. "It's never too late for love, sir, never." Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. Inside, the first real bond between father and sons was taking root, fragile, quiet, and powerful. Neither of them knew it yet, but the next risk Mary would take would change everything again. James woke early that morning, restless, pacing the halls of the mansion like a man searching for something he couldn't name. He passed the nursery door and paused. Inside, Mary sat on the rug with the twins, building small towers with wooden blocks. They laughed each time the tower fell, their little voices filling the room with a sound he still wasn't used to hearing: joy. He wanted to step inside but hesitated. For weeks, he'd been trying to learn how to be close to them without breaking whatever quiet magic she had created. He knew they trusted her more than him. Maybe that was what hurt most, the truth that his sons called another person Mama, while he was still the stranger who signed their medical bills. Mary noticed him at the door and smiled faintly. "Good morning, sir." He nodded once. "They seem happy." "They're growing stronger every day," she said softly. "They need new things to see, new places to touch. It's time they felt the world outside these walls." His face hardened. "You know I can't allow that." "Why not?" she asked gently. "You've seen how far they've come. The house kept them alive, but it's not helping them live." "They could get sick. Something could happen," he replied, his tone rising. "I won't risk it." She lowered her eyes. "Sometimes keeping them too safe is its own kind of harm." The words hung in the air like a challenge. He turned away without answering. "That will be all, Mary," he said, and walked down the hall. She watched him go, her hands trembling slightly. She had crossed that line again, spoken too much, pushed too far, but her heart wouldn't let her stay silent. She looked back at the twins, who were now pressing their small palms against the window pane, staring at the garden beyond. The world outside seemed to call to them. That afternoon, while the house slept in its usual silence, Mary made a choice she couldn't undo. She packed a small bag, bottles, snacks, a blanket, and dressed the twins warmly. They cooed as she strapped them into the twin stroller. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Just a little fresh air, that's all." She slipped out through the side gate and followed the narrow path that led toward the open park beyond the estate. Each step felt heavier than the last. If anyone saw her, she could lose everything: her job, her home, the only family she had left in the world. When they reached Riverside Park, sunlight spilled over the grass. Birds hopped between benches. Children's laughter floated through the air. The twins blinked at the brightness, their small faces full of wonder. Mary spread the blanket beneath a wide oak tree and lifted them down. They touched the ground with hesitant fingers, the cool blades of grass brushing their skin. "This," she whispered, "is what the world feels like." Noah giggled. Eli followed, grabbing a handful of grass and waving it like a flag. Mary laughed through her tears. For the first time, they looked alive, really alive. She let them crawl, explore, and listen to the world around them. Then a little girl with pigtails wandered over, holding a yellow flower. She offered it to Noah. He stared for a long moment, then reached for it, but it was just out of reach. He frowned, then looked down at his legs. Mary froze, hardly breathing. "Noah," she whispered, "you can do it." He pressed his small hands into the blanket, pushed up onto his knees, and swayed. His legs trembled as he found his balance. Slowly, shakily, he rose to his feet. Mary covered her mouth, tears streaming. "That's it, baby. You're doing it." Eli watched, wide-eyed, then pushed himself up, too. Within seconds, both boys were standing unsteady, but determined. The world around them faded. The only sound left was Mary's quiet sobs and the soft rustle of their movements. They had taken 3 steps when a voice cut through the air behind her. "Mary!" She froze. The blood drained from her face. James Walker was standing a few yards away, his expression unreadable. He had followed her. "What are you doing?" His tone was sharp, but there was fear in it too. "You took them out? Without my permission?" Mary turned slowly, shielding the twins with her body. "Please, sir, listen." He stepped closer. "You could have lost them. Do you understand what you've done?" "They're not lost," she said, her voice trembling. "They're found." He started to reply, then stopped. His eyes locked on the twins, on Noah, who was standing on his own, clutching the flower the little girl had given him. The color drained from James's face. His anger melted into disbelief. "They're standing?" he whispered. Mary nodded through her tears. "They walked, sir. Both of them." For a long time, no one spoke. The sound of other children playing drifted faintly in the distance. James stepped forward as if approaching something sacred. He knelt, afraid even to blink. Noah wobbled, then took another step toward him. Eli followed, laughing at his brother's courage. James caught them both in his arms before they could fall, holding them like he was afraid they might disappear. He looked at Mary, his eyes red. "How?" "They needed to want something badly enough to try," she said softly. "They needed to see the world." He stared at her, still holding the twins. "I've been so afraid of losing them," he whispered. "I kept them locked away." Mary wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Fear can't protect them forever, sir. It only makes the cage prettier." For a moment, everything stopped: the breeze, the noise, even the ticking clock in James's head. He looked down at his sons, felt their warmth, heard their laughter, and realized what he had almost destroyed by trying to control it. He turned back to Mary. "Take us home," he said quietly, "all of us." That night, for the first time, James didn't eat alone. He sat beside Mary, helping the twins with their food, smiling when they laughed. And when the house fell silent again, it wasn't the cold silence of before. It was the silence that comes after tears, the kind that holds peace inside it. Something had changed forever. But the real miracle was only beginning. James woke before sunrise the next morning. For a long while he simply sat in the dark, listening. There were small sounds from the nursery above, soft feet, tiny voices, a faint tune being hummed. It wasn't the house he had lived in for nearly 2 years. It sounded alive. He went upstairs quietly. The door to the nursery stood half open. Mary sat on the rug, hair tied back, wearing one of the plain blue dresses she always wore for work. Eli was beside her, stacking wooden blocks. Noah sat in her lap, trying to repeat the words she whispered into his ear. "Say, ball," she murmured. "Bah," the boy answered, proud of himself. Mary laughed, low and warm. "Close enough." James leaned against the doorway, unseen. For months he had been a man, ruled by silence and control. Now, the only thing that made sense was this sound, a woman's quiet patience teaching his sons how to belong to the world. When Mary finally looked up and saw him, she startled, then smiled. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Morning," he answered. "They seem busy." "They don't like sleeping late anymore," she said. "They have things to learn." He stepped into the room, awkward but willing. "May I?" She nodded. He sat on the floor beside them, picked up one of the blocks, and helped Eli build his tower. The boy giggled when it fell, then crawled into his father's lap as though he had done it 1,000 times. James froze, then let his arms close around his son. Something inside him loosened. Later that day, his sister, Anna, arrived from California. She hadn't been to the house since the funeral. The last time she saw the twins, they were motionless in their cribs. Now they ran down the hall laughing. "My goodness," she said, eyes wide. "James, look at them." He smiled, a little shyly. "They're full of surprises." She followed him into the living room, where Mary sat reading to the boys. Anna watched for a long moment before speaking quietly. "She's good with them." "She saved them," he replied. Anna hesitated. "And what happens when she leaves?" James frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's an employee, James. Nannies move on. The boys call her Mama. You can't let them lose another mother." Her words cut deep because they carried truth. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, he sat in his office thinking about it. The idea of Mary leaving made the room feel empty again. He realized he didn't just fear losing her help. He feared losing the light she had brought into the house. The next evening he asked her to come to the study. She walked in slowly, unsure of his tone. "You wanted to see me, sir?" "Yes." He gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Please, sit." Mary looked nervous. "If this is about yesterday, He raised a hand. "It's not. I owe you more than I can ever repay. You gave my boys a life. You gave me one, too." She looked down at her hands. "I just did what anyone with a heart would do." "No," he said. "You did what no one else could." There was a long pause before he continued. "My sister thinks I should set boundaries, that you're too close to them. Maybe she's right, but I can't imagine this family without you in it." Mary's eyes glistened. "Family?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "That's what you are to us. I want to make it official. I'd like you to stay permanently, not as an employee, as part of this family. I can draw up papers that give you shared guardianship, so you'll always have a place here." For a moment, she didn't breathe. "You'd do that?" "I already talked to the lawyers," he said quietly. "All I need is your yes." She covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling. "Yes, sir. I'd stay, not for money, for them, for all of you." He smiled, an honest, tired smile. Then it settled. Weeks passed. The house transformed. Laughter replaced echoes. Mary moved into a room near the nursery. James took time off work. Every evening they cooked together, taught the boys new words, told them stories about Laura so they'd know the mother who had loved them before they were born. On the twins' second birthday, the garden bloomed. Balloons tied to the fence swayed in the wind. Friends and staff gathered, watching as Eli and Noah chased bubbles across the grass. James stood beside Mary, 2 cups of juice in his hands. "Can you believe this?" he said. "I can," she answered. "They were always meant to be this way. They just needed love." He looked at her. "You taught me what that means." When everyone raised their glasses, James cleared his throat. "To Mary," he said, "the heart of this home, and to Laura, whose love still lives in every laugh you hear today, and to these 2 little boys who reminded us all that miracles can be small and loud and right in front of you." Mary lifted her glass, voice trembling. "To family chosen and found." The twins clapped, shouting something that sounded like "Mama! Dada!" and the crowd laughed. As the sun sank behind the trees, James watched the three of them, Mary and the boys, dancing barefoot on the grass. The same park breeze that once carried his fear now carried peace. He thought of the man he had been, and the one he had become. Sometimes, he realized, miracles don't arrive with thunder. They arrive as two small boys taking their first steps, and a woman brave enough to believe they could. The night settled around them softly, the house glowing from within. For the first time it felt like home. Dear viewers, sometimes the biggest miracles come from the smallest acts of love. Mary didn't just teach two little boys to walk, she taught a broken man how to live again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, love can heal what money never can.